What if the person you trusted the most suddenly saw the part of you you'd spent years hiding? The elevator doors closed with a soft metallic sigh, and Claire Miller finally let herself breathe. It was almost 9 p.m., and the office tower was empty, just her and Ethan Cole, the boss everyone admired but no one really knew. The kind of man who didn't raise his voice, didn't lose control, didn't let anyone close enough to see what he felt. And yet somehow Claire had seen it. The way his eyes softened when she spoke. The faint smile he tried to hide when she laughed too loudly. The long day had drained her. The presentation, the deadlines, the awkward silence when they realized they were the last two left in the building again. She told herself it was just coincidence. But deep down, she knew. She stayed late because he did. They stepped into the elevator side by side. The faint scent of his cologne lingered, clean, quiet, steady. She pressed the ground floor button and leaned against the wall, closing her eyes for just a second. That's when it happened. The lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then darkness. The elevator jolted violently, and her heart jumped into her throat. The hum of motion vanished. Silence. Then the emergency light clicked on, casting everything in an amber glow that felt strange and unreal. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, his voice calm but tight. "I think so." Claire's hands trembled as she checked her phone. No signal, of course. "Did it just stop?" "Yeah." He pressed the panel buttons. Nothing. Then again. Still nothing, he sighed. "We're stuck." The words hit harder than she expected. Stuck. Alone. With him. She tried to laugh it off. "Of course. The one night I didn't take the stairs." He smiled faintly. That quiet kind of smile that made people trust him without meaning to. "Don't worry. Someone will notice we're missing soon." But an hour passed. No one came. The air felt warmer, heavier. Claire tried to distract herself, talking about work, about the awful vending machine coffee, about anything. But her voice betrayed her. Nervous. Unsteady. Ethan leaned against the wall, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. He looked tired, not just from the day, but from years of holding everything together. He'd taken over the company when his father died, and since then he'd carried that calm, unshakable face. Claire admired that about him. She also wondered what it cost. She shifted her weight and heard a sharp tearing sound. Her skirt caught on the metal hinge at the bottom of the panel. She gasped and tried to pull it free, but the fabric tore more. "Wait, stop," Ethan said, stepping closer. "You'll make it worse." Her face burned. "I'm fine, I can—" But he was already kneeling, trying to free the hem gently. His hand brushed against hers, and something electric passed between them. Sudden, warm, undeniable. Neither of them spoke. His breath was close, and the sound of it made her pulse race faster. "There," he murmured finally, freeing the fabric. "You're good." "Thanks," she whispered, not trusting her own voice. He stood up, dusted off his hands, and met her eyes. For the first time, neither of them looked away. It was one of those moments where time didn't move, where you realize the thing you've been avoiding is standing right in front of you. The hum of the emergency light filled the silence. Claire swallowed hard. "You're good at this. Staying calm, I mean," he chuckled softly. "It's easier when someone else is panicking." She laughed, but it broke halfway. "You think I'm panicking?" "I think you're scared to admit when you need help." That hit her like a quiet truth. She'd always been the one to keep things together, the one who smiled when she wanted to scream. He saw that, and somehow that scared her more than being trapped. Minutes crawled by. The air felt thicker, and the quiet became unbearable. She sat down, hugging her knees. Ethan sat opposite her, the distance between them filled with everything they'd never said. He studied her for a moment. "You work harder than anyone I know." She laughed softly. "You mean I stay late more than anyone?" "Maybe both." He paused. "You don't have to prove yourself all the time, Claire." "You already have." She didn't know what to say. Compliments weren't new to her, but this one felt different. It didn't sound like flattery. It sounded like he'd noticed. Her throat tightened. "Why are you being nice to me now?" He smiled. "Maybe because I finally have nowhere to hide." The elevator made a sudden groan, shaking slightly. She gasped, and he instinctively reached out, steadying her arm. His hand lingered. Her heart stumbled in her chest. For a moment, the world was smaller. Just the glow of that emergency light, the sound of their breathing, the heat between two people who had spent too long pretending not to feel. She looked up at him. "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" He hesitated. Every day. There it was, the truth she didn't expect. Quiet, heavy, real. Her chest ached. She wanted to ask 100 questions, but none of them mattered. Instead, she said softly, "Maybe we're both better at hiding than we think." He didn't reply. Just nodded slowly, as if agreeing with something he'd known all along. The silence stretched again. She closed her eyes, trying to calm her heartbeat. But every time she breathed, she could feel his presence. Solid, warm, grounding. The air between them wasn't just tension. It was recognition, like two people who'd been standing at the edge for too long. Her voice broke the quiet. "You ever think the universe traps people together for a reason?" He smiled faintly. "Depends on who it traps you with." She laughed, nervous and genuine all at once. "So unlucky you, huh?" "Not even close," her breath caught. For a second, she thought she misheard him, but his eyes said what his voice didn't. The elevator lights flickered again, snapping them both out of the moment. She stood, pacing, trying to shake off the rush of emotion. "We should try the buttons again." He nodded, pressing them all once more. Nothing. Just a low hum, like the sound of the building breathing. She sighed. "I hate feeling helpless." "Maybe you're not," he said quietly. "Maybe you just need to stop fighting everything alone." She turned toward him, startled by the softness in his tone. "You make it sound easy. It's not. But it's easier when someone's willing to listen." She sat again, facing him this time. For a few seconds, neither spoke. The hum of the emergency power filled the space. And then, without planning it, she whispered, "You don't talk much about yourself." He gave a small smile. "There's not much to tell." "I don't believe that." His eyes flicked toward her, a hint of something unguarded there. "What do you want to know?" "Anything real," she said. He hesitated, then sighed. "Real, I guess. I don't remember the last time someone asked how I was without expecting a report afterward." Her chest tightened again. "That sounds lonely." He looked at her and smiled gently. "It is." The words hung in the air, simple, honest, devastating. And suddenly she realized this moment wasn't about two co-workers stuck in an elevator. It was about two people who had spent their whole lives pretending to be fine. Two people who finally didn't have to. A faint creak came from above. The elevator groaned again, and for a heartbeat, everything went dark. Claire gasped and instinctively reached out. He caught her hand before she could stumble. His grip was firm, steady, grounding her in the dark. The emergency light flickered back to life, and for a split second she saw his face. Calm, but his eyes full of something deeper, something he wasn't supposed to feel. "Ethan," she whispered. He looked at her, not saying a word. For the first time in months, she didn't think about the office, the rules, or the what-ifs. She just thought about him, and the way his hand felt around hers. The elevator shuddered slightly again. They both turned upward instinctively, expecting rescue, but no sound followed. Just that quiet hum again, and in that fragile silence she finally understood. Being trapped wasn't the scariest part. Feeling something she couldn't undo was, she wanted to speak, to break the moment before it swallowed her whole, but her voice failed. He still hadn't let go of her hand. Her heart was racing, but she couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't stop the feeling that everything in her life, every quiet moment, every missed chance, had been leading to this. The elevator's low hum became the only sound left between them. Her eyes lifted slowly to meet his, and just before she could say the words she'd been holding back for months, the lights flickered again. And the elevator made a deep, echoing click. They both froze. The air grew still. Something was about to change. Claire whispered his name, her voice trembling, and Ethan finally looked at her the way he'd been trying not to. like a man who just realized he couldn't keep pretending anymore. What happens when silence finally speaks louder than words? The elevator still hadn't moved. The emergency light hummed above them, painting everything in soft amber. Claire's heart wouldn't slow down. The air felt thick with everything that had been left unsaid. She turned away, pretending to check her phone even though the screen had gone black long ago. Her fingers shook slightly, but she hid it with a sigh. Ethan stood across from her, calm as ever, but she could see something had shifted in his eyes. The calm wasn't calm anymore. It was restraint. She could almost feel the words he was holding back. How long can two people hide what's written in their eyes? He looked down, adjusting his tie, though it was already loosened. "Claire," he said quietly, "we shouldn't let this get weird." She tried to laugh, but it came out small. "We're trapped in a box, Ethan. It's already weird." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that broke the tension just enough to make her chest ache. Fair point. Minutes passed. The faint buzz of the emergency light filled the silence between them. Claire sat down, her skirt carefully folded around her knees, still embarrassed from before. Ethan noticed, shrugged off his suit jacket, and handed it to her. "Here," he said simply. She hesitated. "I'm fine. Take it anyway," he replied, his tone gentle but firm. She took it. The fabric was still warm from his body. She pulled it around herself, whispering, "Thanks." He sat down across from her, stretching his legs out. "You don't have to thank me for that." The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was quiet, but comfortable. Claire glanced up. "You always do that." "Do what?" "Pretend you don't care." He leaned back against the wall. "Maybe I've had practice. Practice hiding or pretending?" His lips curved into a faint smile. "Both." She wanted to say more, but the look in his eyes stopped her. It wasn't cold, just tired. Tired of being the strong one. She looked away, her voice barely a whisper. "You don't have to always hold everything together." "I do," he said softly. "Someone has to." His words lingered in the air. She could hear the weight in them, the pressure of leadership, of expectations, of being seen as the man who never broke. She folded her arms, staring at the floor. "And what about you? Who looks out for you?" He didn't answer. Not at first. Then, slowly, he said, "No one needs to." That single line hit harder than anything else. Claire realized this man wasn't cold, he was lonely. The kind of lonely that builds up quietly, layer by layer, until you forget what warmth feels like. She looked at him differently now. The boss she thought was untouchable suddenly seemed human. She exhaled. "You know, for someone who runs a company, you're terrible at asking for help." He gave her a sideways look, the hint of a smirk. "And you're terrible at taking a break." Touché. They both laughed, and for the first time that night, it didn't feel awkward. It felt like two people finally exhaling. But then the laughter faded, and silence returned. Softer, deeper. Claire studied him in the amber light. His sleeves were rolled up, the veins in his forearms catching the faint glow. He looked different, not like her boss, not like the man behind the desk, more like someone real. She said quietly, "Can I ask you something?" He nodded. "Why do you always act like you don't notice me?" He looked up, caught off guard. "Who said I don't?" Her pulse skipped. "Then why pretend?" He held her gaze for a long second before answering. "Because falling for someone I'm supposed to lead, that's not something I can afford." The words fell like a confession. Claire didn't know how to breathe for a moment. Her heart thudded, hard and heavy. She wanted to say something, but the elevator groaned, breaking the moment. A mechanical clank echoed from above. Dust drifted down. Ethan moved closer, steadying her by instinct. His hand brushed her shoulder. "You okay?" "Yeah," she whispered, though her heart wasn't. He stayed close for a few seconds longer than he should have. Their eyes met, again, and this time, neither of them looked away. He pulled back slowly, clearing his throat. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." "It's okay," she cut in softly. The air between them changed again, charged, unspoken. The sound of rain against the building filled the background. Somewhere above, thunder rolled faintly. Claire smiled nervously. You ever notice how time feels slower when you want it to move faster? Ethan chuckled. And faster when you want it to stop. She nodded. Exactly. They fell quiet again. She couldn't stop thinking about his words, falling for someone I'm supposed to lead. It replayed in her mind over and over, the way people replay songs they can't admit they love. Finally, she said, You didn't have to say that, you know. He looked confused. Say what? The thing about falling. He gave a small shrug. I wasn't planning to. So why did you? He leaned forward slightly. Maybe because being trapped in an elevator with you makes honesty easier than silence. Her breath caught. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. That's not fair. I know. They both smiled, but it didn't reach their eyes. The hum of the emergency light continued, steady and low. Claire wrapped his jacket tighter around herself, staring at the small red button on the panel. Feels like we've been here forever. He glanced at his watch. Only an hour and a half. She laughed softly. You're counting? I'm trying not to. A pause. Then she said, You're afraid of this, aren't you? He frowned slightly. Afraid of what? This. Us. Whatever this is. Ethan didn't reply right away. His silence said more than words. Finally, he said quietly, Afraid isn't the word. Responsible, maybe. Responsible people fall too. She whispered. He exhaled slowly, his voice low, and sometimes that's exactly the problem. For a while, neither spoke. The city outside went quiet. Just rain, faint thunder, and two people suspended between floors and choices. She rested her head against the wall, her voice barely audible. You think anyone will believe us when we say we just talked? He smiled faintly. Depends on how well we lie. She looked up at him. You're not very good at lying. No, he admitted, his tone softening. Not to you. Her chest tightened again. The same ache she'd felt since the first time he'd smiled at her across a crowded office. And then, without warning, the light above them flickered again, dimming to almost nothing. Claire gasped. Not again. Ethan stood quickly, reaching for the panel, pressing the buttons again. Still nothing. The elevator felt smaller now, like the walls were inching closer. She stood too, pacing a few steps. What if we're here all night? Then we'll survive all night, he said calmly. She turned sharply toward him. You always sound so sure of everything, he smiled faintly. That's part of the job. Must be exhausting. Every day. Something in his voice made her stop. It wasn't just exhaustion when it was sadness. The kind you don't admit to anyone. She softened. You don't have to always be the strong one, you know. He gave a small smile. If I stop, everything else falls apart. Then let it, she whispered. He blinked, surprised. What? Let it fall apart just once. You're allowed. Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't. He stared at her. Really stared. And for the first time, she saw his guard drop completely. His eyes softened. You make it sound easy. Maybe it's easier when someone's sitting in the dark with you. He looked at her for a long time, then nodded slowly. Maybe. They stood in silence. The sound of the storm outside faded. The air felt still again. And then, unexpectedly, he sat down beside her. Close. Close enough that she could feel the warmth from his arm against hers. He didn't say anything at first. Then he spoke, his voice low. When my father ran this company, he said leadership meant being alone. That's what I grew up believing. That to be respected, you had to keep people at a distance. Claire turned toward him. And do you still believe that? He smiled sadly. Until tonight. Her breath caught. He looked down, fingers brushing his wrist nervously. You've changed that. Without even trying. She couldn't move, couldn't look away. His words weren't planned. They were too raw, too honest. Before she could answer, the elevator made a sudden clicking sound. The lights blinked, then steadied into white. They both froze, blinking against the sudden brightness. She exhaled shakily. Maybe it's finally moving? Ethan stood up slowly. Or maybe it's a false alarm. They waited. Nothing happened. He laughed softly. Guess not, she smiled weakly. We're still stuck. He looked down at her. And there was that look again. The one that made her heart forget how to beat. You know, he said quietly, I think I've been stuck a lot longer than this elevator. Her heart stopped. He took a step closer. Just one, enough to make the space between them disappear. The air grew still. Claire swallowed hard. Ethan! He shook his head slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. Don't say it. Not yet. The elevator was silent again. Just two people breathing in rhythm, afraid to move, afraid to speak. And then, before she could take another breath, the faint buzz above them changed, the sound of gears clicking, and the elevator began to move. Slowly. Downward. Ethan met her eyes one last time and said quietly, Whatever happens when those doors open, remember this. What if the moment you tried to escape was the one you never wanted to end? The elevator was finally moving, slowly, creaking like an old heart learning to beat again. Claire stood frozen, unsure if she wanted it to stop or keep going. The air between her and Ethan had shifted. It wasn't heavy anymore, but it wasn't light either. It carried something delicate, unspoken, something neither could take back. He stood beside her, one hand on the railing, his gaze fixed on the flickering numbers above the door. We're moving, he said, almost as if convincing himself. Yeah, she whispered, her voice thin. We are. Sometimes being trapped is what sets your heart free. The lights flickered once more, making her heart jump. For a second, it felt like the elevator might stop again. It didn't. It just trembled, humming faintly, as if deciding whether to let them go. Ethan looked at her. You okay? She nodded even though her pulse was racing. Just ready to be out of here. But that wasn't true. Not entirely. A part of her didn't want to step out into the bright lobby where everything would go back to normal, where they'd have to pretend that this never happened. Ethan leaned back against the wall, exhaling slowly. I can't believe this night, Claire smiled faintly. You mean being trapped with your assistant for 2 hours? He chuckled softly. Something like that. Their laughter faded quickly, replaced by the quiet hum of the descending car. Claire wrapped her arms around herself. I didn't think you ever got nervous, she said. I didn't think I'd get trapped in an elevator with someone who sees right through me, he replied. She blinked. I don't... Yes, you do, he interrupted gently. You see more than you say. That's what makes you dangerous. She frowned slightly, half amused, half confused. Dangerous? He nodded. You make people feel seen, and once that happens, they can't hide anymore. She swallowed. Is that what's happening now? His eyes held hers. Maybe. For a few moments, there was nothing. Just the steady rhythm of the elevator and their uneven breathing. Claire turned away, her chest tight. You know this can't mean anything, she whispered. I know, but it feels like it does, she said, her voice breaking a little. I know that too. The words hung between them like a fragile thread. Real, but impossible. She sighed. You'll walk out of this elevator, and tomorrow it'll be meetings and reports, and everyone pretending like we're machines again. He smiled softly. Maybe that's the problem. We're not machines, she looked up. So what are we then? He didn't hesitate. Human. The simplicity of his answer hit her harder than she expected. Human. That was all. Just two people who happened to stop pretending for a moment. The elevator shook again. A metallic sound echoed from above, making her flinch. He stepped closer instinctively, his hand resting lightly on her arm. It's okay, he said quietly. His voice was calm, low, reassuring, the kind that could steady storms. She didn't move. His hand stayed there, warm and certain, until the elevator steadied. When he finally dropped his hand, she almost wished he hadn't. She forced a small laugh. Guess the building's as tired as we are. Maybe it's just trying to make us talk, he said. Claire looked at him. We've done nothing but talk, He smiled. Not about the right things. She hesitated. Then start, he exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. I used to think I had control over my life, that if I just worked hard enough, stayed focused enough, nothing could surprise me. And? She asked softly. And then you showed up. Her heart skipped. Ethan, he shook his head. You don't have to say anything. He stopped himself, struggling for words. You remind me what real feels like. And that scares me. The elevator creaked again, louder this time. She took a small step closer without thinking. You think you're the only one scared? He looked down at her, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. No. I think we're both standing here pretending not to be. Her laugh was quiet, breathless. That sounds about right. Silence again, but this time it felt fragile, like glass. Every second stretched thinner. The elevator slowed, and for a brief moment, they thought they'd reached the ground. Then, a jolt, hard. The lights flickered out completely. Claire gasped. No. Ethan grabbed her shoulders to steady her. Hey, it's fine. Just a power flicker. But his voice, steady as it was, had a tremor this time. The darkness wasn't total. The faint red of the emergency button glowed between them, barely enough to see each other's outlines. She could feel his breath. The closeness was overwhelming. Every sound, the faint hum of machinery, the creak of the cables, the rhythm of their breathing, felt amplified. Her voice came out small. What if we're stuck again? Then we wait, he said quietly. You make it sound easy. It's not, he admitted. But panic doesn't help. She laughed softly, her nerves spilling out. You'd stay calm even in a burning building, he smiled faintly. Only if you were there. Her breath caught. Don't say things like that. Why not? Because they sound like they mean something. His voice dropped lower. Maybe they do. There it was again. That silence that felt like falling. She didn't move, didn't breathe. The air felt charged, alive. In the dim light, she could barely see him, but she didn't need to. She could feel him. Steady, close, real. Ethan broke the silence first. You're shaking. I'm fine, she whispered. He reached out, found her hand in the dark. You don't have to be. Her fingers trembled in his. For a moment, she almost pulled away. But then she didn't. She let him hold it. Neither spoke. The elevator remained still, like the world had paused just for them. After what felt like forever, she said, You're not supposed to do that. He smiled faintly. I know. Then why are you? He hesitated. Because I want to. The honesty hit her harder than anything else. No excuses, no explanations, just truth. She didn't know how to respond. She didn't even know what to feel. All she knew was that her hand was in his, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. Minutes passed. Neither moved. The silence became something different, not awkward, not empty. It was safe. Finally, she whispered, This doesn't make sense. Neither does staying in a broken elevator, he said softly. She laughed quietly. You're impossible, he smiled. And you're trouble. The elevator made another sound, a faint mechanical hum, like it was trying to wake up again. The red glow flickered. Claire looked up, her pulse quickening. You think it's starting again? Maybe, she repeated, half laughing, half sighing. That word's going to drive me insane. He smiled gently. Then I'll find you another one. The elevator jolted again, this time softer. Lights blinked back on, weak but visible. They both blinked against the brightness, still standing close. Too close. Ethan didn't move. His hand was still around hers. She looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. When this is over, what happens then? He hesitated. I don't know. Will you just pretend it didn't happen? His jaw tightened. Do you want me to? She opened her mouth to answer, but couldn't. The truth was tangled inside her chest. The elevator started to move again, slow, steady, humming softly. The floor indicator blinked. 3. 2, she exhaled. Guess it's ending. He looked at her. Or beginning. She smiled faintly. You really think so? He nodded. Some moments change everything. The doors dinged softly as the elevator reached the lobby. The bright lights outside spilled through the thin crack between the doors. Her pulse raced. Ethan. He looked down at her, eyes softer than she'd ever seen. Whatever happens after this, and don't forget that it was real. Before she could respond, the elevator let out a loud mechanical clank and stopped again. The doors froze halfway, stuck open just an inch. A flicker of light from the lobby shone through. Claire blinked in disbelief. You've got to be kidding me. Ethan groaned quietly, pressing the buttons again. Not again, nothing. The lights flickered, dimmed, then steadied in that same faint amber glow they'd known too well. They both laughed helplessly, half in disbelief, half in surrender. Guess the universe isn't done with us yet, she said. Ethan turned to her, eyes unreadable. Maybe it's trying to tell us something. Claire tilted her head slightly. Like what? He took a step closer, slow, deliberate. That some things can't be postponed forever. Her breath caught. The faint hum of the elevator faded again. The world outside the doors felt far away. Inside, everything was still. And as the silence deepened, she realized the only thing louder than the elevator's silence was the sound of her own heartbeat. Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper. Claire, if this is another second chance, what are we supposed to do with it? And before she could answer, the lights went completely out, plunging them into darkness once again. What if the hardest part wasn't being trapped, but walking away when you finally got free? The elevator was dark again, silent except for the faint sound of their breathing. Claire could barely see Ethan, but she could feel him there. The air was thick with everything left unspoken. Her heart pounded, not from fear anymore, but from the ache of what might happen next. A spark of light flickered overhead, weak but enough to bring their faces into view again. He was watching her, not with authority, not as her boss, but as someone who didn't want the moment to end. What do you do when reality comes back? But your heart stays behind? Claire exhaled slowly, forcing a nervous laugh. I think the elevator's playing games with us now. Ethan smiled faintly. Or maybe it's just giving us one last moment, she blinked. Last moment for what? He didn't answer, and that silence said everything. The power returned suddenly, flooding the small space with light. The doors groaned, then slid open halfway, stuck once again before fully parting. A sliver of morning light spilled through the gap. The night had passed without them realizing. They had been inside for hours. Claire stepped closer to the door, peering through the opening. It's morning, she said softly. We actually made it till sunrise. Ethan joined her side. Yeah, looks like we did. Maintenance voices echoed faintly outside. Someone must have been working to restore the system. The sounds of the real world felt strange now. Loud, distant, intrusive. She turned back toward him. Guess this is it, he nodded. Guess so. But neither moved. The quiet stretched, thick with everything they couldn't say. The weight of normal life waited just beyond those doors. Meetings, boundaries, rules. And yet, inside that elevator, all of it felt so far away. Ethan took a deep breath. Claire, before we step out, I need to ask you something. She met his eyes. What? He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Did any of this mean something to you? Or was it just the situation? Her lips parted, but no words came out. He waited, his expression unreadable, but his eyes full of hope and fear. Finally, she said quietly, it wasn't just the situation. He exhaled, as if releasing something he'd been holding in for years. Good, she smiled faintly. But it can't mean what we want it to either. His smile faded. Why not? You're my boss, she said softly. You have a company to run, a reputation, and I have a career to protect. He stepped closer, his voice low, steady. You think I care about that right now? You should, she said, though her voice shook. He looked at her. Really looked. Claire, you're not just another name on my payroll. You're the only one who makes me feel like I'm not just a man behind a desk. Her throat tightened. Don't say that. It's true. She shook her head. You'll regret this once we walk out. Maybe, he said quietly. But I'd regret it more if I never said it. The elevator creaked again, and the doors pushed open fully this time. The bright morning light poured in, washing over them. A rush of air hit. Cool, new, real. For a moment, neither moved. Claire finally stepped forward, turning back once. We should go. He followed her out into the empty lobby. It looked surreal. The polished floors, the faint smell of coffee from a nearby cafe, the distant sound of city traffic waking up. The normal world had returned, but they didn't feel like the same people who'd walked in the night before. A security guard spotted them. You two okay? The system glitched out around midnight. Ethan nodded. We're fine. Claire smiled politely but didn't speak. The guard handed Ethan a clipboard to sign, and as he did, she looked around. The sunlight streaming through the glass, the reflection of herself in the lobby window. She barely recognized the woman staring back. When Ethan finished, he turned to her. Coffee? She hesitated. Now, he shrugged. We've been through worse first dates. Her lips curved despite herself. You really don't give up, do you? He smiled. Not when it's worth it. They walked outside together. The city was alive again. Cars honking, people rushing, phones ringing. It felt strange, almost dreamlike, after the stillness of the night. They stopped at the corner near a small cafe. The early sunlight touched the buildings in soft gold. Claire turned to him. This feels unreal. It does, he said quietly. But maybe that's what makes it real. She laughed softly. You're not as logical as you pretend to be, he smiled. Not around you. For a few seconds, they just stood there, the world moving fast around them while time slowed for the two of them. Then her phone buzzed. A flood of missed calls and messages from coworkers filled the screen. Reality crashing back in. Her expression shifted. I should go home, change, pretend this never happened. He looked down. Is that what you want? She hesitated. It's what I should do. Should and want aren't the same thing, he said quietly. Her heart twisted. You make it hard to think straight, Ethan. Maybe you've been thinking too straight all your life, he said with a small smile. She looked away, biting her lip. Don't say that. He took a small step closer. You're afraid. She laughed softly. Of you? No, he said gently. Of what this could mean? She didn't answer. The silence between them said enough. He finally sighed. You don't have to decide anything today. But I meant what I said. None of it was an accident. She looked up, eyes shining with something she didn't want to name. And what if I can't handle what comes after? Then I'll handle it for both of us, he said simply. Her throat tightened. You can't fix everything, Ethan. He smiled faintly. Maybe not, but I can try. They stood there for another moment. Two people caught between what they wanted and what they feared. A car horn blared in the distance, snapping her back to reality. She took a small step back. You should get some rest, he didn't argue. Just nodded. You too. She turned to leave, her heels clicking softly against the pavement. The sound felt final. But halfway across the street she stopped. She turned around. Ethan was still standing where she'd left him, hands in his pockets, watching her. She walked back slowly, her voice low but steady. You're impossible, you know that? He smiled. So I've been told. For a second, they just stood there, sunlight between them, city noise all around. Then she said softly, If this were anywhere else, if you weren't my boss. He finished for her. Then what? She looked down, then back up, meeting his eyes. Then maybe I'd let myself fall. His voice softened. Then maybe you already have. Her breath caught. The air between them seemed to hum again, that same feeling from the elevator, quiet but undeniable. But before either could say more, a phone rang. Loud, sharp, pulling them back. Ethan checked his. It was his assistant, asking about an urgent meeting. Claire's phone buzzed too, her team waiting for updates. And just like that, the world reclaimed them. She forced a small smile. Duty calls, he nodded, eyes still on hers. Yeah. They stood there for a heartbeat longer, as if hoping time would give them one more pause. It didn't. Claire finally said, "See you at work." He smiled sadly. "I'll pretend not to notice how beautiful you look," she laughed softly. "You'd better." She turned and walked away, this time without stopping. The city swallowed her figure into its noise and light. Ethan stood still, watching until she disappeared into the crowd. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small piece of torn fabric, the edge of her skirt from the elevator hinge. He hadn't meant to keep it, but somehow it had stayed there. He turned it over in his hand, a faint smile crossing his face. He slipped it back into his jacket pocket and whispered to himself, "Maybe some things aren't accidents after all." Hours later, in her apartment, Claire sat by the window, sunlight spilling across her desk. She opened her phone, hesitated, then typed a message. "Did you make it to your meeting?" She didn't send it. She deleted it instead. But before she could close her phone, a message appeared on the screen from Ethan. "The elevator's fixed, but I'm still stuck." Her breath caught. A smile tugged at her lips, uninvited but real. She stared at the message for a long moment, the city alive outside her window. Then she typed back slowly, "Maybe I am too." She didn't hit send yet. Her thumb hovered over the screen, heart racing, mind spinning. Outside, a faint rumble of thunder rolled across the skyline, the same sound that had echoed through the elevator the night before. She closed her eyes, hearing his voice in her memory. "Whatever happens when those doors open, remember this." Her phone buzzed again, another message from him. Short, simple, and impossible to ignore. "If this is another second chance, don't waste it.